standing at their lowest level in nearly 4 years. I spoke with the CEO of Crescent Petroleum, Majid Jafar, and I asked him for his take on why prices are going down and not up.
I think there's a few reasons. I think one is definitely the delayed effect of the shale revolution in the US, the fact that North America has been taking up the slack from the falling production in many Middle East countries. I think a second important one is some of the OPEC big producers like Saudi and Kuwait signaling that they're happier with a lower oil price, although it can't be much lower because they do budget at $80 to $90. A third important one that doesn't get enough attention is demand. I think that's probably the most important. And concerns over China and growth in the developing world is having an effect on energy markets. I don't see it going very much lower because some of the production from North America ceases to be economic, much lower than current oil prices, plus many government budgets of the producing countries rely upon a certain level of oil price.
Iraq is an enormous potential player in the world of OPEC, but obviously, because of what's happening on the ground there, because of the security uncertainties, it's really not tapping its full potential. You're invested in this sector. You've had staff in Baghdad for the best part of 20 years. How concerned are you about the situation we're seeing on the ground today versus other crises?
Sure. Well, first thing, just on the US, energy independence is, of course, a myth. It's like economic independence. Energy self-sufficiency may be possible and is likely, but at the end of the day, huge percentage of the world's oil and gas, around half, is in the Middle East. It's where the low-cost production is, and it's where the price will continue to be set, and therefore it does impact the world economy. Turning to Iraq, as you say, I mean, the IEA forecasts that 40% of the world's growth in exports of oil over the next decade are going to come from Iraq, or should come from Iraq. So there's a huge reliance on Iraq to be meeting some of those oil and gas needs. And yet, looking at the last 10 years since the US invasion, the record has been poor. It's struggling to be 3 million barrels of oil production, exports less than 2. Despite having set targets of 6 and 12 million barrels. And obviously the recent conflict is not going to make that easier. Overall, looking at the country, what needs to happen beyond just the security is the policy. And there's hopes and promises that the new government that's just been formed in Baghdad, in addition to getting control of the security aspect, which is obviously the priority, is going to put in place some of the long-standing or long-outstanding legislations and national policies to spur the growth of the oil sector.
Will you be putting more money into Iraq at a time like this, when obviously its future looks so uncertain?
Well, obviously, like any company, we need to assess the risks. However, as a leading private sector company from the Middle East, our assessment of risk is perhaps different from a sort of Western company. We're from the region. We're there for the long term. And we see that you can't necessarily paint all of Iraq or any country in the Middle East with the same brush. There are local differences and nuances. Clearly, there are huge potential reserves. It's ranked number 3 in the region in terms of proven reserves. The possible reserves could put it at number 1 because it's vastly underexplored, particularly in the oil and gas. I mean, there's only a few thousand wells ever been drilled compared to 10 times as many in Saudi and 1 million just in the state of Texas. So it's very early stage. But aside from the security aspect that gets all the attention, they do need to put in place the right incentives. Because when oil is at $80 to $100, oil and gas companies do have other options looking around the world. And particularly with the revolution in North America, you see that the key challenges are often not below the ground, but above the ground. And the US, despite having technical challenges, has stability, a liquid market, and the right service and transport infrastructure, whereas much of the Middle East, despite having great reserves below the ground, has lack of those things above the ground combined with the conflict and the political instability.
Majid Jafar there, the CEO of Crescent Petroleum, speaking to me earlier on. Well, this is the Business View Live from London. A new start for Fiat.